From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politti and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to the podcast history. Second emergency podcast in a week. What a week here at Rutgers. We're busy, guys. We're not supposed to. We don't like to be busy. We're sports writers. This is crazy. The special Kirk Ciarrocca edition of the podcast. Our long national nightmare is over. We have a new offensive coordinator. He's a familiar face to long-time Rutgers fans. Was the offensive coordinator here in 2010. Got fired then. We'll talk about that. Went on to a very successful career at Minnesota. Not so successful at Penn State. Brian, just catch us up. Where's Kirk Ciarrocca been? He was not a guy on our list. Were you surprised by the hire?
In hindsight, no, because this is one of Greg's the wells he likes to go into is finding guys he either knows and has worked with, or people that he has worked with that trust. Right. So no, in hindsight, this should have been maybe a name we should have looked out for. He went to Minnesota last year when he hired Joe Harris-Simiak. Did it again. I have to imagine that he's not a PJ Flex Christmas card list for the foreseeable future. It keeps continuing to take his assistant coaches. Kirk Ciarrocca is interesting in that. So this is obviously his second time back at Rutgers. He's done this at 3 different schools now, because he was at Minnesota for the second time this year, and he previously had 2 stints at Delaware. So he is just constantly churning, going back to places he's been before. The second stint at Minnesota was maybe a little too short-lived for me to say whether it was better than the first. He had a pretty successful first run at Minnesota, and then I have no idea about Delaware. I think he worked with Joe Flacco when he was at Delaware the first time. But anyway, probably should have seen this coming, but after 41 days and 89 days since Sean Gleason was fired, I'm just, along with everyone else, just happy they hired somebody and we could finally move on from this.
The first time at Minnesota certainly was successful, Pat. I mean, 2019, that was one of the best teams in Minnesota history, 11-2. The offense was great, not just good. I mean, he scored 30 points a game or something crazy like that. Tanner Morgan, the quarterback, passing it around, 3,200 yards. The numbers, I mean, if you're a Rutgers fan, you see these numbers with that offense produced out there, you're like, please, just give me a fraction of that. Obviously, better personnel, but I mean, a proven play caller at the Big Ten level.
No question. And this past season at Minnesota, you saw what he was able to do to make the offense for Mo Ibrahim and just hand the ball to him at a 3-to-1 clip, rushing to passing, which is an astonishing ratio. And certainly something that Rutgers has the personnel for, you would think, next season. So I think he's done it at a high level, like you said, at the Big Ten, and will be adaptable, I think, is the key word, and why Schiano wanted to bring him in. He's a guy that will tailor make this offense to the personnel, and that's what you want any good football coach to do. Tailor to the players' strengths.
And I think that's what we can all agree that's what got Sean Gleason fired. Like, he was just tired of having an offense that wasn't built around the talent he had, was trying to jam square pegs in the round holes, wasn't handing the ball to Sam Brown up a point against Nebraska when your defense is playing well, just stuff like that. And I have no doubt that he is going to be a person that Greg Schiano can trust to hand the offense to him, that will tailor the offense, as you mentioned, Pat, and that Sam Brown better get ready, because I think that this is, as long as that kid is healthy, this is setting up to be, you're going to build this thing, complement your offense, Ray Rice kind of deal. The question though, Brian, and I don't think we have to, it's not really a question. The answer is he doesn't have the personnel to run his system here. I mean, Gavin Wimsatt is a quarterback that you would think could run some spread RPO stuff, certainly, but he hasn't shown the accuracy necessary for that. And certainly they don't have the receivers for that.
Yes, exactly. And to the point of 2019, you mentioned they had better personnel than Rutgers. They had Rashad Bateman, who's one of the better rookie wide receivers in the NFL.
And he was the second best receiver on that team, I think, too. Right. So, I mean, yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Right. And they didn't have a great quarterback in Tanner Morgan, but he was solid, which is, I don't think
accurate.
We can say accurate. Words we can't really use with Gavin Wimsatt just yet. Now, Ciarrocca does deserve credit for developing Tanner, right? He was with him, I think, through the first 3 years of his career. So I guess that's encouraging in the sense that he can develop a quarterback to be solid. But yes, the fact that he had a lot better pieces around him, better offensive line, much better receivers. And then this year he had, as Pat mentioned, Mo Ibrahim, who's one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. Even if you don't have a great offensive line, he can get a ton of yards after contact contact, which is something that Sam Brown showed an ability to do. Maybe he can develop that. But yeah, the personnel, it's the transfer portal window is still open. There will still be another one after the spring. You have to hope that they can bolster the personnel. They have to get a wide receiver. They have to get at least one of them, right? What they do in that realm will kind of shape what Ciarrocca will be able to do in his first year.
It's fascinating because he's gonna. The two questions I have, the first two questions at the press conference, assuming they make him available in the coming days, is one: are you bringing a quarterback? I think is a key one. He won't answer it, but I'm very curious to see if he has a guy he wants to add to that room. One and two, is he going to mix up the staff? Are other assistants he's going to bring with us? I mean, we don't have the answers to that yet, but I wonder what's going to happen to Nunzio Campanile. Pat, you've known him for what long time? Greg Schiano said he was a candidate for the job. It turned out he was not a candidate for this job. Do you think we're going to see major staff changes?
That's a great question. I would tend to say Schiano likes the guys he has in place, and that Ciarrocca was brought in to kind of just be the leader and the face of the room, face of the offense, and that he can kind of keep the staff in place, because I think that all those changes just sets you back when you're trying to build a program. If you keep switching assistant coaches and doing things like that, you're setting yourself back. So I think from a consistency standpoint, Ciarrocca would be best suited to maybe keep the staff in place and maybe bring in one or two of his essential guys. But I can't see there being an overhaul of the offensive staff. I think that would be a major step in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I don't think they'll have, last year they replaced the entire defensive staff. I don't think they'll do anything that drastic.
No.
I think I would set it at 1.5, and I'm not sure if I'd go over or under, but I think there will be at least one. I just don't think they can afford to not change anything aside from offensive coordinator after that disastrous season. I just don't know how heavy they'll go in changing, especially at this point in the year where, the season's been over for a month.
You mentioned the word afford, and clearly they can afford to make changes. And to me, and this is, we don't have the salary figures yet, but it's nothing short of remarkable. And I wrote about it in my column on this. Rutgers entered the Big Ten, or not entered, I guess it was, early in the Big Ten. They had, when Chris Ash was the head coach, a 28-year-old inexperienced Drew Meringer making $450,000, I think, in 2016. Now they're hiring away a guy from Minnesota who had just signed a multi-year deal that was going to push him over $1 million. They hired him away. St. Paul Pioneer Press said package $1.5 million. We don't have the numbers, but it's going to be in the neighborhood of that, certainly, which is going to make him one of the highest paid assistant coaches in the Big Ten. That's just nothing short of remarkable if you think of where this was. And then you're throwing the fact that they're still paying Sean Gleason $1 million next year. Rutgers is in the deep end of the pool now. With those numbers, they've got to have a good offense. I don't know what my point here is, other than just to marvel at it from a standpoint of like the days when Rutgers would lose they are stealing assistants from a Big Ten program now. It's kind of remarkable.
I think that fans, when they see that number and then they see Kirk Ciarrocca's name, they don't think it's a good thing that they're spending that much money on Kirk Ciarrocca, is my point. I think if they see that number, they think they want, I don't know a name off the top of my head, but a big name, a splash hire, and then they go back to a guy they had 12 years ago, right? A guy who's been bouncing around the Big Ten, who was fired 2 years ago from a better program. I agree. It's remarkable that Rutgers, one, has the capital to spend, or I guess hopes to make that capital back at some point. I don't know. But I think Rutgers fans were hoping, if you had told them beforehand they would spend this much money, they were hoping it would be a different name than Kirk Ciarrocca.
Yeah, it's just clear to me that Schiano wants to pay for experience, and he wasn't going to go to another experimental hire like Sean Gleason. So I think that was where the money comes in, that the spending is remarkable to marvel at, like Steve said, but you got to pay for 35 years of experience, which Ciarrocca has. And I think that's what you're ultimately paying for, a guy that's been around the block. And he might not be the flashiest name because of his, being fired at Penn State, but it's the time, it's time to put up or shut up, and Rutgers is putting up. So
it was clear that they weren't going to go to Fordham. They weren't going to hire some guy who did nice things at the Division I AA level. They weren't going that route. He wanted the guy he knew has coached in the Big Ten.
Yep.
The question, I guess, and when you look at his resume, did nice things in Minnesota, and that wasn't Rutgers obviously wasn't the first program to notice that. Penn State did in 2020. James Franklin hired him. It was a disappointment. They were 4-5 on a team that had talent. I mean, it's not like he went in there and had to do what he's going to have to do here. We don't have a lot of clarity what happened there. I will say, you give him a pass, I guess, a little bit because the fluky nature, as Greg Schiano said a million times to that season, impacted it. But yeah, I mean, that's a concern. He certainly had his break to go to Pennsylvania, his hometown program, I guess, Brian, and it didn't end well.
Yeah, to your point, I think the COVID-ness, the freak nature of all kind of dilutes what you can take away. I mean, Sean Gleason looked like the best coordinator in the Big Ten that year, and we all know how things ended. So I don't know if you can. Maybe Rutgers fans hope it's the opposite, that Kirk Ciarrocca looked dreadful that one year and he could be better. I don't know, but I think it's. I mean, I was just reading, and you can never really tell how honest these coaches are, but when James Franklin was talking about why they moved on from Kirk Ciarrocca, the COVID year was brought up. So I don't know if that excuses it, but I think that is a fair caveat to include in the reasoning there.
And there are a lot of caveats also about his tenure at Rutgers. I know neither one of you guys covering the team. Brian, I think you were still in kindergarten at that point. Where were you at?
I graduated. I think I was in third grade.
You were in third grade. You weren't in third grade in 2010. That's not true.
Let's actually do the math here. I was 14. I was in high school.
Okay, thank God. Good grief. But yeah, it didn't go well, and it's an interesting point in Rutgers history, and I'll do some of the talking here because I was there. Although I had to go back and talk to a lot of, I call them Schianoologists, who remember exactly what happened there. He came into a time when Rutgers was scoring in 2008, scoring a lot of points. He took over 2009 as the play caller, and 2010. Anthony Davis goes to the NFL. They lose. The offensive line crumbles. They have Tom Savage at quarterback. They can't protect him. He gets hurt. Quarterback is sacked 59 times. And I think what Rutgers fans most remember about that team was the wild night when Mohamed Sanu, NFL receiver, top receiver on the team. I think he ran the ball. I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but close to 60 times, just taking the snap under center, and that was the only thing that this offense could do to figure out how to move the ball because they couldn't protect anybody. It was also the year that Eric LeGrand got injured. And the team went into the tank. And I think a lot of people rightly look back on that and say that you really can't judge what happened that season because of Eric's injury. Certainly I agree with that, but Greg Schiano did at the end of that season judge it as a failure and make the change. He and Kirk Ciarrocca was the guy he fired. It's fascinating to me that we're coming back full circle there. I wonder, in some ways, this is Greg Schiano saying, I screwed that up. And I do think people around Rutgers back then thought he made the wrong decision to fire him. There were other coaches to bring in at the time. There are a lot of factors going on in 2010. That said, do you think this is an admission that he got it wrong back then?
I would tend to say yes, it is. Anytime you give someone a second chance, it has to be some sort of admission. And from what it seems like, he was kind of close with Schiano. And, like you said, the unlikeliness of the Eric LeGrand injury and all that came with it, another excuse per se, but I would tend to say that it is certainly any retread hire is a second chance.
Certainly, no question. Yeah, and it's also I think we can also agree that he's not going to, like, he's staking his 2.0 go around on this guy fixing the offense, and like he's not going to get. If it doesn't go well, there's not a third guy to hire his offensive coordinator.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. Back in like 09-10, when Ciarrocca was leading the offense, there's a little bit more of the pro style, like we're going to play great defense, win games by playing great defense and kind of just playing a complementary football, to steal the term.
Well, but they scored a ton of points in 08 and 09. I mean, they had NFL receivers and all those teams. I mean, Mike Teal at the tail end. They thought Tom Savage was going to be, he's the biggest recruit ever at the time. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what they did, maybe that, and I don't remember exactly, but maybe that move was to appease Tom Savage at the time. It didn't matter. Savage still left the program. It went to Frank Signetti, and soon it was Greg Schiano leaving the program as well. So it was the end of that sort of time for that era for Rutgers. But it is fascinating to think about, the sliding doors. That's a movie you guys probably haven't seen. The circle of life here that's going on at Piscataway. All right, let's dive into insider questions first, and then do some basketball talk, because we all three of us were at the game last night trying to watch the basketball game while writing about the offensive coordinator, which I don't recommend, folks. the wireless at the rack was something to behold. And we promised we'd never speak of it again. So let's just move on before we do this. All right. A lot of fun questions from Rutgers Insider people. One comment, do we get to make 2009 called and they want their headline back jokes? Very good. So here's a question. What is the over-under on the new OC improving the offense and lasting more than 2 seasons? That's a good question. I mean, obviously they can't fire him after one. That would be sure the contract is guaranteed. But it did. I mean, Sean Gleason lasted 2.5, and that was kind of a borderline. I mean, that's unprecedented in recent Rutgers history. Brian, you want to take that one? If they found the answer long term?
I don't know. That's probably a cop-out answer. I am curious. That is what I'm curious about. That is something I was going to bring up. Does he have another hire in him if this one fails, or is this it? If this blows up and doesn't work, is this it? I mean,
does the defense get him to 8-4? I mean, I guess that depends on the record, but no, if they're 4-8, the next time there's certainly not going to be another offensive coordinator. I think. I mean, we're in year 4 with his second offensive coordinator. I don't think so. Yeah.
Well, then I guess he better hope that he does fix this.
Another question, Steve F. in Northern Virginia. Along those lines, how long does Schiano and Ciarrocca get to show significant improvement in this offense? Which hopefully manifests not in just statistical improvement, but wins.
NIL Now, a podcast dedicated to the name, image, and likeness of today's college and high school athletes.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future, as a nest egg for something when something goes wrong. There's less than 1% of these football players make it to the NFL. Their plan B is sometimes not as lofty as plan A. This NIL thing, when you ask what's the next important thing, is to make sure that these players are coming to school for education, sports, but also NIL is a close third in that. It's an investment into these players now that they can take advantage of or leverage their name, image, and likeness to, further their careers. So now you have a nest egg after you've invested so much time into your skill set in college. You should be able to leave college with something.
This is NIL Now.
In my opinion, Schiano's second tenure success is now inextricably linked to Ciarrocca and the offensive success. I totally agree with you, Steve F. from Northern Virginia, Pat. I mean, it's hard to argue with that. This is his guy, and then that salary. This is it.
To go back to the last question too, I think sustainability when you run I'm taking the Ciarrocca offense as looking at what Minnesota did last year. And if you're going with that sustainable model of let's rush the ball, let's make sure our quarterback has easy throws, throw in some play action, then I think this is a guy that is exactly what Schiano wanted. And I think that kind of parlays into sustainability. So I would take the over on 1.5. And like you said, they're married, and a big part of what Schiano is going to want to do with this rebuild has to come back to what Ciarrocca does.
Right. Another question along those lines. This hire seems like Schiano is trying to win games 17-10. I get that winning is all that matters, but at what point are fans just bored to death of watching this team? I think we've reached that point, folks. Yeah, I mean, you take after you lost to Maryland 37-0. You would take 17-10. You would take 17.
No question.
Did they score 17? How many times did they score 17 last season? Honestly, yeah, of course. He would sign in blood for 17-10.
People would love to go win every game 7-0 if they won. The issue is that they don't win. I get the point. Also, I don't think Greg cares how you win. It's just winning. And he believes, right or wrong, that playing great defense and grinding out the clock is how you win football games, even in 2022 or 2023, I guess now. So that's just that's the way he is. And I know when he got hired the second time, people expected him to change a little bit in many different ways. I think most ways he really hasn't changed much. And that's another example of this, just the way he views football. And I think anyone who expected him to hire a run and gun young guy who's going to spread the ball out just was a bit naive.
The problem along those lines, I mean, we all agree that the defense is better, but we also watched it against elite offenses, and it's not that. I mean, that's part of it, Pat, right? I mean, it's the 17-10, but they're not holding Ohio State to 10. They're not holding Penn State to 10. They're not holding Michigan to 10. They're not holding Michigan State.
They were leading Michigan at the half because of a blocked punt, right? That's like the Schiano specialty, but you're right.
Right, yes.
The defense has to be the strength of the team, and the offense has to be the complement to the good defense. obviously Brian talked a lot about the personnel that's not there, but the personnel that is there is an offense that, if you have an offensive line, can run the ball very successfully. And that's what Rutgers is really going to have to prove this year, that they can have an offensive line that, unlike Ciarrocca's downfall, can carry this team.
All right. The obvious Wimsatt question becomes every week. Do you guys think the question is, do you guys think Wimsatt is the quarterback answer, or does Rutgers admit he's a bust and move on? They are not doing that. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination, nor should they. No, they've got a lot invested in the guy. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this question a lot. Will the new OC have a quarterback coach? At one point, we all think we kind of agreed that he should. That's not going to happen. Kirk Ciarrocca is going to be the quarterback coach. I would almost certainly guess. And that's going to be on him to make this guy into a productive passer and build a system around him. And that's going to be his first priority.
There's no magic quarterback. There's no guy you're going to get in the portal that's going to come in, and it's going to be Gavin Wimsatt, barring a miracle, right? So people should prepare for that and stop asking us about it, and hope that Ciarrocca can, over the course of an offseason in the spring and training camp, develop him to be able to, one, make easy throws in the flat and not overthrow receivers, which is just the basic, and then build from there. Again, I keep coming back to this. The personnel also matters. They need to get better personnel.
Of course.
That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. Even still, Gavin Wimsatt must improve his accuracy, and it's on Ciarrocca to fix that.
But it's not just accuracy. It is decision making in this system. I mean, you're at this RPO, you're at that line scrimmage. I mean, it is very important for the quarterback to be able to recognize what's happening defensively. I mean, obviously that's with any system, but it is an special premium if he's going to run the system he ran at Minnesota. So, and Noah Vedral was very good at that, but he's obviously run out of eligibility. All right. Can we just jump into basketball? We want to talk. I can come back to some hoops questions, but we should at least start. We should start with just another really impressive victory. You can't put it any other way. I get it. Maryland's probably, and it's no problem. Maryland's going to finish in the bottom half of the Big Ten, maybe in the 10, 11, 12 range. Still, you come off this big win against Purdue, number one. A couple of days, you're back at the rack. I think a lot of people worried, all right, this is where this team has stubbed its toe in the past. Instead dictated the game with its defense, didn't have its best game. But Paul Mulcahy, man, he's good. Let's leave it there.
He's really good. I think Kevin Willard touched on this too. Like, he is now able to, when you put the ball in his hand, create offense and know the moment. When he knows he has to attack and score for his team, he'll do it. When he knows he has to be a bit more passive and spread the ball to Cam Spencer and his targets, he'll do it. He's a really smart basketball player who has shown a lot of development. He told me at Big Ten Media Days that he thought he was underrated, something he's felt for a long time, and that people had not seen what he's able to do. And over the last couple of games, I think he's shown that a lot, like the way he showed that last February. And yeah, I think you wrote this morning, I totally agree. This team will go as far as Paul Mulcahy takes it, and as far as this defense will take it, which has been the best defense in the country over the past month. I'm going to write that for tomorrow morning. I have numbers to prove it. They've been the best defense in the country, in college basketball.
In the country, huh?
In the country by a full point. In really? Metrics, yes, the best team. And look, let's be fair. They've played Coppin State and Bucknell in that group, but they've all, and Seton Hall, which is very offensively deficient, to be nice. But they also played Indiana. They played Wake Forest, and they played Purdue, which is one of the better offenses in the country, on the road, and they played Maryland. So yeah, this defense is legit. Paul Mulcahy is legit, and I think Rutgers' Big Ten title candidacy is also legit.
And it's Kevin Willard back with Maryland, obviously Seton Hall, longtime Seton Hall foil, not exactly a popular guy in the rack, but a really insightful interview. And what he said after the game about that Rutgers defense, just how it's something you now have to prepare for because the way it presses, and it's a complete change. It's just a different animal than it has been in previous year, and the pressure they put on the ball. And he said, he made a very good point that really helped solve some of the half-court scoring woes, and we saw that again in this game. And he also made the point, Pat, that it's a different team than he faced last year with Seton Hall because the ball is now in Paul Mulcahy's hands, and you don't want to say like, well, Rutgers is a better team because Geo Baker's watching from the crowd. That's not the point. But Paul Mulcahy is a different player because
Paul Mulcahy, yeah, like Brian said, he's creating offense for himself and other people. And that versatility has gone a long way. And just to go back to the defense, they had another 20 steals last night, which is it's an absurd number.
20s, right? Gosh, you're right. Yeah,
and,
everybody who played has steal pretty much. That's great. Yeah.
Right. And I think what Brian's probably going to write about too with the defense too is how it's not just one guy. It's not just Caleb McConnell playing defense. It's not just Mawot Mag. It's, Cam Spencer, you thought was brought in here to be a shooter, but he's a steal machine. He's all over the place. He's got the great hands. So it's a defensive system that really works well, and they all really work well together, which I think is key.
All right. So pushing it forward, if they beat Iowa, they will be ranked. I guess that's not as important as it once was because they ended that long drought without being ranked 2020, but they'll be ranked, and they go to at Northwestern. Iowa's not very good. Northwestern's having a pretty good season, so that's going to be a tough place to play, I would think. Still, 2 very winnable games. This team could be 5-1 heading into next week. I mean, you agree? I
agree. I don't know if we should count our chickens before they hatch, just because, Iowa came back down. They were down 21 to Indiana, and they came back at 1 last night, which is pretty impressive. But they almost choked it away, too. I didn't see that. Yeah, they almost choked it away. But
Indiana, man.
Yeah. That's another story. That win looks a lot less good every time Indiana plays.
Is it possible that Rutgers just damaged Indiana at that point, that this one punch in the face from Rutgers again has just ended another? Man, I come back to this all the time. Indiana thought, Rutgers is joining the Big Ten. Finally, we got a team we can beat up on. And it's just hilarious. Love it. Yeah, I think Rutgers fans would agree with you that it never stops being funny. Never stops being funny.
Yeah, I think if they crush Iowa again, they're in a prove it spot from now on, right? Like they had to prove that they can avoid the letdown against Maryland, and that's good and great now. And now they have to prove that they can build on that and beat Iowa and not lose to, because Iowa's probably the 3rd or 4th worst team in the Big Ten as far as metrics at this point. So it's almost, you can't afford to lose that game. And then going to Northwestern, that'll be the ugliest game ever played of all time. That game is going to end 41-34. It's going to be disgusting. But Rutgers is going to have to come out on top of that defensive battle. They're going to want to come out because that was a game they almost came back from like 20 down last year. That was Paul McKay's breakout game. So maybe he'll want to finish the job there. Right. But yeah, I wonder where they'll get ranked. Jerry Carino, who has an AP vote for New Jersey, estimated that if they beat Iowa, they'll be ranked in the 20 to 25 range, which I think is probably fair. But yes, if they do beat Iowa, I would be shocked if they weren't ranked.
Right. And you're starting to see the national people wake up. There's some stories, just a lot of praise on the Athletic. It's starting, the buzz is starting to build around the program. So a couple of wins, and then they'd be back at the home court against Ohio State on January 15th. So another big week, but it's fun. You can see something building. And I do think this is his best team, Pat. I think he thinks it's his best team. And for all the, thoughts that, this program's crazy. Yeah. It is crazy. It's going to take a step back. It could take a step forward, which is, just an incredible sign of what Steve Pikiell has built here. All right, let's see if we got any questions that we haven't answered. Someone is embarrassed to ask this question. Don't be embarrassed, folks. You can ask us anything. There are no dumb questions, just dumb people. I'm kidding. Come on. I am embarrassed to ask this question, as I should know the answer. But does Paul McKay have eligibility next year, or is this definitive final year with Rutgers team?
He does. He has one more year.
Does. Is there any? Obviously, haven't talked about it, but is there a chance for another year? What will you, if you had to put your? Obviously, we don't know how it's going to finish, but if you had to bet on it, is he starting backcourt for Rutgers next year?
Yeah. So I have no inside information. Like you said, this is purely an educated guess. I would assume that Paul McKay will be back next year. But things change. There's still 2 months left in the season. We don't know how things are going to go. We don't know how but I would guess right now that, yes, he will be back next season.
Yes. Make your NIL checks payable to Knights of the Raritan to make that happen. All right. Let's see if there's any other questions. Someone wanted to know about the Death Star or improvements to the Jersey Max Arena. I think we're going to have an update on the latter, perhaps this coming year soon. The Death Star, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that in a long time. It's certainly still on the radar. We just saw just what they're doing in Miami with some of the facilities. So the facility drive hasn't ended, even in the era of NIL. But we don't have any great updates unless either one of you guys have a better answer to that question.
No, but I do like J-Mac. That's a funny nickname. The
J-Mac.
Yeah. Jersey Mike's Arena. I like that.
Yeah, let's go with that. Jersey Mike's Arena. What would the C be?
Athletic complex. Jersey Mike's Arena complex.
We'll have to call Jason McCourty and ask him for the copyright on J-Mac first, though.
It's good stuff. All right. Thankfully you're here, Pat. So when we do the what else, 1 second, I don't have to pretend to know what's going on with wrestling as we did last week. Last week we couldn't even fake it. It was like,
oh God.
And we just segued. If you know, if you're listening, we just segued to like bad Revolutionary War jokes. Where I don't know how we made it. We clearly couldn't answer the wrestling question. So
The
we're
colonial era.
Battle of Monmouth. It was like winner loss. Battle of Monmouth. Rutgers versus the Brits. All right. Anyway, so what we got with wrestling wise.
What we got? They're closing out non-conference schedule this weekend. Bloomsburg Friday night and Ryder on Sunday. Ryder should be an interesting match. As always, very New Jersey centric. Guys on both sides. It's like a very Atlantic City feel. If you're a Jersey wrestling fan, it'll be fun. But overall, I wrote it the other day. 3 areas of concern. They're kind of just, to me, stuck in this spot between like 15 and 20 in the country, where they don't have a surefire All-American like they had the past couple of years, and they're just like outside of that top tier of the Big Ten, and getting to that next level is Goodell's challenge, and it just doesn't seem like they're going to get there this year. But there's some bright spots, and as they start Big Ten competition next weekend, it'll be interesting to see.
What's holding it back from getting there?
They just don't have the absolute, like, they're getting the best kids in New Jersey, which is a good start, but you need the best kids in the country from Pennsylvania and Ohio and those other wrestling hotbeds too. So I just think like Penn State gets the best kids every year from around the country, regardless. That's why they're number one every year. I just think Rutgers gets one blue chip guy, and then they don't follow up with a second or third or fourth.
Right. Yeah. And that's it.
It's tough to do. It's tough to do.
It's tough, of course. Right. Yeah. It is fascinating. It is kind of a fascinating place for it to be, because everyone would agree that has been the standard bearer, one of the standard bearer programs at Rutgers. But yeah, making the next step seems like it's harder than any of the other teams that we've looked at other than football, of course. So
yeah. Like when they had
gentlemen.
Soriano and Ashnall, you would think like this is a team that can be top 10, right? Like 2 of the greatest guys ever, and not even then. So it's just
remarkable.
It's tough.
All right, let's end on that note. 2 emergency podcasts in 1 week, unprecedented times at Rutgers, lots of news. I guess we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk some basketball. Until then, thanks to Devco, thanks to everyone who subscribes to our Rutgers Insider, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.